Good afternoon and welcome to our Ash Wednesday installment of JPAC Your Lunch. I am Emily Greenwald and I welcome you to learn about Janesville Postcard History today with Den and Judy Adler. We are having a very exciting month at JPAC. It is coming in like a lion and in a good way because we are having so many events, and actually in the first 2.5 weeks we have 14 events going on. So we just had last week 4 sold out shows of Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day with Spotlight on Kids. And so it was wonderful to have that type of energy in the center last week. But this week we have coming up Janesville Little Theater's production of 3 one-act plays. Now, one-act plays are a lost gem. I'm so glad that they've decided to use them because they're these beautiful little succinct stories. So if you don't like one, you just wait a little bit and you got another story. And they'll be giving 3 different stories for us. The first is Agatha Christie's The Patient, another wonderful crafted mystery that Agatha Christie is so famous for. And then there is Trifles by Susan Glaspell, which is a look at rural life in Iowa in 1916. A farmer is found dead in his farmhouse, and the leading suspect in his murder is his wife. And 2 women come to gather things for his wife, who is now in jail. And through that, they find through these little things that the menfolk have determined are trifles. That's how they really uncover the reason, her motivation for perhaps killing him. We don't necessarily know. And then ending that program will be Sham, a social satire. And that's a really fast-paced, funny show, very much in the tradition of perhaps Noel Coward, where there's a lot of witty dialogue going back and forth. A couple come home, and they, from the night, I believe, at the opera or the theater, and it's in the 1920s, and they find out that their house is being robbed. But the robber is not concerned about running away when they come home. And he strikes up a conversation with them, and he's a very witty young man. And pretty soon, the tables have turned, and they're actually giving him the stuff that he has come to rob them from. So to see how all of these little stories turn out, I invite you to Janesville Little Theater. It is Thursday. Let's see here. What day is that? I think the 11th? No, what day is today? The 9th? I'm sorry. The 10th, the 11th, and 12th at 7:30, and then Sunday, the 13th at 2 p.m. And so come join us for that. And then we have United Arts Alliance Arts Hall of Fame, where they'll be inducting the 2010 recipients, which are Dennis Vichinsky, Janet Castle, and Kay Jelinek, all very worthy people in our community who have supported and promoted and taught in the arts for many, many years. And it's a wonderful opportunity to celebrate those accomplishments. Well, today we have Den and Judy Adler here. And Judy, I have had the pleasure of working with. She is one of our volunteer ushers. And about 1.5 years ago, we were sitting in this room during the Janesville Art League Holiday Art Show. And she mentioned to me that her husband was writing a book. And I thought, well, that's fascinating. What's it about? And at that point, I think it was still just kind of taking shape. And it was, focusing on the different postcards from the Janesville throughout the period of our history, and that there were a lot of, it was really an interesting project because we got to see how our city changed over a period of time through these different picture snapshots. And so I thought, oh, well, I'll keep my ears open. I said, well, that should be a JPAC Your Lunch program. And then one day she brought me in a postcard, and the book was done, and I knew it was time to have Judy and Den here to share what they learned through this process. Den has also written a novel, and I hope that he'll touch a little bit too about just that writing process and how to take these ideas and formulate them into the written word and then eventually get them published, which personally I find very interesting because I hope to do that one day too. I'm collecting all of these stories, we just have to tell them someday, right? So without further ado, I would please welcome Judy and Den to share their stories and our stories as well. Thank you.
Den did most of the writing, so he's going to do most of the talking. Not that the two always go together, but we'll try. Thank you for coming today. Happened to there goes my joke. Somebody always ruins the joke at the last minute. She mentioned Ash Wednesday, and I thought, church, there's nobody in the front pew, but the joke has been ruined. But if that's the worst of my problems today, then we'll have a good day. Back when I was writing my novel, I was in a writer's group up in Madison, and we met at the Barnes & Noble on the west side, out by Westtown. And you know, in those bigger bookstores, they have a rack of books with those sepia-covered books. And it was kind of embarrassing to stand there and look at books from Delavan, Whitewater, and eventually Evansville, all these little towns in Wisconsin that they had, and there was nothing from Janesville. And I thought somebody ought to do one. And about 3 years ago, just before Judy retired, Arcadia Publishing, the publisher of those sepia-covered books, contacted us and asked if we'd be interested in writing the postcard history of Janesville. Somebody had told them that I had a collection of postcards. And we both wanted such a book to be available, but we really didn't want to do it, at least not at that time. And we told them no. And they said, we'll get back to you in a year and see if you change your mind. So they did, and we did, and we started work on the postcard history series book of Janesville, and we've just signed a contract to do another book in their Images of America series, which is based on photographs in the Historical Society, the Rock County Historical Society. And just as we were finishing up that, thought we were done, somebody discovered a trove of pictures that the city engineers had taken back 90 years ago and up to the present. So we had a whole bunch more to look at. But we've got the one book done. The second one will take a while to do. And these books are 128 pages long with about 228 illustrations in this one. And most of the cards are from the golden age of postcards, which occurred between 1905 and 1915 approximately, and ended around the First World War. But some of the cards are a bit older than that, and some go up to the 1950s. One is even from the 1970s. For some years, a Rockford collector and dealer friend of mine had proposed that we do a book of postcards about Janesville and maybe southern Wisconsin. He had a fantastic collection, and in fact, he did a book that was out a decade ago called Postcard History of Rock County. It was a big book and filled with postcards from Rock County out of his collection. Unfortunately, I never got to see his collection. He died a couple years ago before we ever got together. But he had told me about his dad, who had an even bigger collection, including Janesville. And I talked to his dad, and he was interested in having us use his cards for the book. And but when I called him to set up an appointment about a couple of months later, he had changed his mind and didn't want us to use them. Well, I had enough in my collection to fill the book, except a lot of the cards would have been very similar, and we wanted a lot more diversity in the book. So we had to look around and find some people, and eventually we were able to scan cards from the collections of Deb Case, who many of you may know from her work at the Hedberg Public Library, Carl Damershausen, who's currently on the school board, Maurice Montgomery, who used to work for the Rock County Historical Society, and many of you know is a treasure trove of information about Janesville and Rock County history. And we ran an early draft of our manuscript past Monty, and He both found some mistakes and added to the information, so we really appreciated his efforts. And also Cliff Englert, the former city park supervisor who abandoned us for warmer climate of Florida, sent us his collection of cards, and we were able to use some out of that. So we thank all those people. We set up a division of labor that worked pretty well for us. Judy scanned the postcards, she being more of a computer guru than I am. She scanned all these cards, and and she also did most of the, I might as well say all of the research for the information about the cards, the history. I drafted the captions and set up the organization of the book. And of course, after we scanned them, we wound up, when we had all these cards in these different collections, we had more cards than we needed, and we printed out in rough form the cards that we had and then made our selections from them. But deciding on which ones to use got to be pretty difficult. And we tried to use cards that gave us the most information about Janesville, and we're in the best shape, so it gave the best image. But also, we liked to put in cards that had something that you could see today, so that you could relate to how things had changed over the years. For example, I had picked one of my own cards for the cover, and that is the picture on the cover. But we found that Karl Dammershausen had a nearly pristine card. I mean, this piece of cardboard is over 100 years old, but his had no marks on it, whereas mine had a round postmark on the picture. So we used his card instead of my nearly identical one for the front cover. And so it wasn't possible to find cards that had something current all the time, but it's really amazing. If you look at these cards, you see how things, in some cases, haven't changed much at all. The first photo inside the book, for example, shows the Centerway Dam and the 4th Avenue Bridge and the Railroad Bridge. And if you substitute the modern Centerway Bridge for that old 4th Avenue Bridge and replace the steam train with a couple of red and gray Wisconsin and Southern diesel locomotives, you have basically that same scene today. And on page 11, if you look, postcard taken from the Monterey Bridge, you see almost the same 100-year-old scenes with the railroad bridges and the dam, the Southern Dam, and the Rock River. Most of the cards that we used were from prominent postcard publishers of the early 20th century, many of whom created an entire series of beautiful cards of Janesville. They included the Rotograph Company of New York, Rayfield Tuck and Sons of Great Britain, Hugh Layton of Portland, Maine, and closer to home, E.C. Krupp of Milwaukee, E.A. Bishop of Racine, and F.M. Palmater and the Smith Drug Company, which was on Milwaukee Street here in Janesville. And Smith published many of their cards through the Tuck Company. Many of the cards that are in here were printed in Germany before World War I. And Germany was known at that time to have the world's most skillful lithographers. If you take a loupe or a strong magnifier and look at one of the German cards, those lithographic dots are so fine you can hardly see them, whereas in later cards they're much coarser and larger. In writing this book, we learned many new things. I suppose maybe we should say old things about Janesville. For example, the Spring Brook area down around the GM plant was once considered a suburb of Janesville. And as I mentioned, Racine postcard publisher E.A. Bishop did a nice series of cards. One of the things, not really unfortunate, but just kind of funny that they did was they numbered their cards, the series of cards, in the 1800s. And so some people have mistakenly thought that that was when the photographs were taken, except that no one except Native Americans occupied this area before 1835. And one of the examples on page 119, Bishop's card of a horse drinking out of a fountain that was along Main Street at the bottom of Courthouse Park, was given number 1811. And we used Deb Case's card for that image, but maybe we should have used my copy of the same card. My card, number 1811, had been mailed and was postmarked 1911 on the back. And someone apparently thought Bishop's number 1811 was a typo, and so they crossed it out and printed 1911 on the front of the card. In my collection, we also have another Bishop card. That one's number 1824, titled Boat Livery. And it's obviously on the west bank of the river, right next to the, at that time, the 4th Avenue Bridge, now Centerway. But we had never heard of it, and we couldn't find anything about it. And that was a problem, because it was a beautiful card, and I wanted to use it, but Arcadia requires us authors to write between 50 and 70 words for each image that's on a 2-image spread on a page. And if we couldn't write anything, we couldn't use the image. Judy, however, discovered some terrific information about the boat livery in a search feature that she accessed through the Hedberg Public Library, and we explain about that on page 8. So if you ever want to use it, it's a really valuable resource. So you can read about Fred C. Turner's boat livery on page 28 of our book. Who could resist his ad in the July 17, 1909 Janesville Daily Gazette? The one best place to go for a most enjoyable outing is up the river, and the one best way to reach it is with one of our boats. And in his May 14, 1910 advertisement, he mentions his new auto livery. Apparently, he was Janesville's first auto rental agency. And he added there, fishermen desiring an early Sunday morning fishing trip can get boats and minnows here at any hour. In fact, Judy found so much information about the Turner boat livery that it went from being left out of the book to appearing on a page of its own with the maximum 140-word caption. Just as some postcards show some things haven't changed, others illustrate how much things have changed. On page 51, there's a postcard that shows 3 men having a conversation in the middle of the Milwaukee and Main intersection. And try that today. On page 62, we have a card showing the Dwight greenhouses. Anybody familiar or know where the Dwight greenhouses were? Well, they were right up the street here on Jackman, 318 Jackman Street at the corner of Oakland Avenue, right up the street from our house. We didn't know that till Judy again used that search engine. There once was a Chicago and Northwestern train station called Koshkonong, north of Janesville, actually north of Milton, at the Rock-Jefferson County line where Highway 26 takes a sharp turn. And a card showing that station is on page 74. Has anyone heard of Electric Park? We have a postcard labeled Electric Park showing a pond in the center and a gravel bluff in the background. And again, we knew nothing about it until Judy looked for it in that search engine that we mentioned, and she found advertisements. Electric Park was at the south end of Main Street in the early 1900s, probably about in the area where the new armory is now. And it hosted concerts and vaudeville acts, and a dime got you a trolley ride from Maine and Milwaukee and gave you entrance into the park and your trip back, round trip, plus entrance into the park. It didn't last long, but it must have been a popular place for a while. In fact, St. Mary's Church had its grand picnic benefit there on August 25th, 1904. And if you hike the Ice Age Trail today along the river on the north side of Riverside Park that the Ice Age Trail Alliance fixed up so nicely in 2007 and again in 2009. You can see on page 125 that the Devil's Staircase looks very much like it did 100 years ago. We thank you for your attention and interest, and I think we have some time for questions, and then we'd be happy to sell you some books and autograph them for you. Are there any questions? Dean?
The publishers are in New York and things are printed in Germany. Janesville was kind of a small town way back then. What made this profitable for somebody to produce these cards?
What made what?
What made it profitable for somebody
Oh,
to produce
okay.
these cards?
Okay, he asks, Janesville is a small town and these publishers were out in New York, and what made it profitable for them to come to a small town and produce these cards? Actually, Janesville wasn't the smallest town either. There were, some of these guys went to much smaller towns, but what postcard publishing at that time was a big business. As you could tell, I mean, I didn't even name all the different publishers. But they would send out photographers, in the case of the biggest companies, and of course, then they would hit all the towns in an area and photograph them. Not only that, but they also made it more cost effective, I guess you would say now, by trading negatives. One of the, an example of that is we have a spread of, I think, 4 county courthouse pictures. And it took me a while, but I suddenly realized that 3 of those pictures, plus the one on the title page for government buildings, all came from the same negative, but were doctored by the publisher's artists. The original one shows big telephone poles and wires all over. In the other 3, those are gone, at least pretty much. Some are gone more than others, but one of them has it as it was, kind of a winter scene. There's no leaves on the trees. Another one has looking like a spring scene with a little bit of tinges of green here and there. And others are summer ones with the foliage all very dense. And so they would use the same negatives, and you see that kind of time and again. So because it was big business, it was pretty profitable. Smith, what they would also do, for example, the Smith Drug Company published a lot of cards, and apparently the druggists there were collectors, because I have a card from a Walter Stendhal, who was a druggist, and he sent a card saying, please exchange cards. And that's what people did. They not only used them for letters, but they traded these cards. And Karl Dommershausen has one that one of the Smiths, Ed Smith, sent to Germany. Somehow it wound up back in a dealer's box here in this country, but it had gone to Germany, and they used the Rayfield Tuck Company to produce their cards. And that's what these big companies would do. They would let druggists and small dealers in the different towns produce cards for their own customers, and also then the big companies made a profit, but they didn't always have to go to the towns. Tuck did, though. They had their own Janesville series, which, for whatever reason, they had printed in Holland, whereas the Smith cards were printed in Germany through the same company in Great Britain. So it was, it's an interesting history of how these postcards were produced. Any other question? Okay.
Have the cards survived because people have all these collections, or are there really, I mean, were they ever used as postcards that really real?
Yeah, most of them were used. So to me, the perfect card is one with a perfect postmark, a nice stamp, the rarer the better, of course, and nice handwriting, which is also pretty rare, which has been sent, because then you can tell, well, you know the card was produced before the date on the postmark. But it's also nice to get a beautiful, pristine card with sharp corners, which is also pretty rare. I mean, they're just cardboard, and to have these cards last for over 100 years and still have the vivid colors and sometimes be in very pristine shape. You wonder how they came through that, because you can still find sometimes in dealers' boxes these 100-year-old cards that look like nobody has ever touched them. Dealers now mostly will keep them in plastic envelopes and to protect them. And it's getting more rare now that they'll find things in attics. Most of the attics have been cleaned out of these cards. But that's kind of how they were, and dealers got them, and yes, some people collected them, and even now there are auctions of these things.
What kind of value does a card from that era have?
They really vary.
Depends on the quality, or is it?
Yeah, mostly on the quality, but also on the rarity. The cards that we have in our book, I would say probably most of them would be between $6 and $10. There are rare cards. Postcards had everything on them, from views from cities to artist drawings of pretty women to Halloween cards have probably gone up in value more than any other category. There were some really interesting and creative Halloween cards that artists created. Sometimes they had the hold to light cards that they had punched out little places where the moon or the stars were or whatever, and then you'd hold them to light and you could see the light come through. Christmas cards also. Santa Clauses with other than red robes are more valuable than the ones with the red. There's purple and green and gold and different colored robes that Santa has. So a lot depends, but rarity and condition is the main aspect of what they're worth. And there are cards that have sold for over $1,000 at these auctions, especially. eBay seems to have driven the prices up. You can find, you can go on eBay and just check for Janesville postcards, and you'll have some come up, or any category that you want to see: trains, depots. It's just about any there's magazines. There's a newspaper called Barr's Postcard News, and there's another magazine, Postcard World, I think it is, that just started up. Postcard Collector went out of business. It's not really a big thing. Some people don't know these things exist. Any others? Ann?
Dan, you talked about a second book that's in the works. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
About the second book? Okay, she asks about the second book in the works. It'll look very, very similar to this. Arcadia Publishing, which is based in, is it Charlotte, North Carolina? Huh?
I think it's South Carolina.
South Carolina, okay. Produces these books, and they have kind of a template thing. Everything is done by computer. Hardly anything, we hardly send them any paper at all. The only paper we sent them, other than the contract, was we have to keep a log of the pictures with the number, and the number has to match the picture in the scan and all that. But most of it, the captions are all sent in. And they can do things really fast, and of course that's how they make their money, because this is so organized that they can do things. We sent in our cover copy, the 2 pictures for the cover, the front and back, and then this text to them about a week before the deadline, and our editor immediately emailed back that he had gotten it, and he hoped to have a mock-up of the cover to us by the end of the week. He had gotten it on Monday. We sent it Friday, and he got it when he went to the office on Monday. And he said, by Friday, by the end of the week, I hope to have the mock-up so you can see what your cover will look like. 2 hours later, we had it, which meant it went to South Carolina, and was made up there all by computer, and then back to him, then back to us in 2 hours. The same thing will be done. Judy has been busy scanning photographs in the Rock County Historical Society collection, and one afternoon we did the ones the engineers took at City Hall. Now we have about, what would you say, 500, 600? 800? You learn something new every day. Well, somehow we're going to have to get those 800 down to about 230 and decide which ones will be most valuable to put in the book. And those are all scanned already, and she's got most of them printed off. So I think that's a pile like that. And we've gone through them, and we have to pick one for the cover. And what did I have in the possibilities? About 20 that I thought we could consider for the cover. So we have to pick one out of those 20, and then scan that at a higher resolution for the book cover. They were pretty good on this first one. They gave us our first choice of the cover. They told us we had to send in about 6 or 7, maybe 10 different covers for them to consider, but they said, tell us which ones you like, and they went with our first choice of both the front and the back cover. So we'll pick out the pictures. Now, one of the things, we may pick out a picture, but just like the boat livery, if we find something, no matter how great a picture it is, if we can't find any information on it, so I can dream up at least 50 words for it, we aren't going to be able to use it. But obviously we have plenty of pictures to choose from if that happens. So then we'll go into research mode. Judy will get back on that search engine and start looking for information about some of these places, and it's amazing what's on that. There's 5,000 or so newspapers that you can research off that search engine, and then put in what you're looking for, like boat livery. Janesville is all she put in there, and came up with these advertisements in early 1900s gazettes. So the research for this, of course, is much easier than it was even 5 or 10 years ago, and it sure saved us a lot of time.
What's the theme for your next book?
The Images of America series, but it'll be photographs of Janesville. No particular theme. We're not picking any one theme, I don't think. Okay.
Is there a time period?
Oh, the question was, is there a time period? And yes, there is. Our final deadline is September 13th. So it's going to be an interesting time crunch. The Arcadia series also has a number of other series. You could do industries. Whitewater has a general book, and they have one on Whitewater industries. You could do, there's one on Beloit about a club down there. You could do it on a single industry, on multiple industries, on labor, on churches. If you look under Arcadia Publishing, they have a number of different series of books out there.
Yeah, in fact, I've forgotten to get back to him. One of my teachers at St. Francis Seminary, who we sent a copy of this to, he taught me English, so I thought maybe I should show him the results. He said, oh, too bad Milwaukee doesn't have anything like this. And so I went on Arcadia Publishing, and you can go on there, and you can go by state to find out what books they have. They have about 6,500 titles in all, in different series. They have several different series. Postcard History series is one, and the Images of America series is another. Yeah, as Judy said, you could break it down and write about any topic as long as you've got 100 or 200 pictures.
And actually, there's about 6 different books out by Arcadia on Milwaukee.
Yeah, actually, well, that's what I was going to say. Thank you. Yeah, I got to write to him because I think there were 13 books on the Milwaukee area, different aspects of it. So, but it's, they have this set up just really amazingly so that it's, they can produce these books pretty quickly. And you know, some of these small towns, they really probably just sell in the hundreds. But apparently they still can make a profit at it, doing it this way.
Did Arcadia contact you about writing the Janesville Postcard History, or did you contact them and present this idea to them?
Well, the contacts go back and forth
repeat
about
the
5 or
question.
6
Repeat
years.
the question.
The question was, who contacted who about this book? Did we call Arcadia, or did they call us? And I don't remember where the initial contact was, because it was about 6 or 8 years ago. And actually, there had been a contract out there which kind of fell through. And so they contacted the library, the Historic Commission, and other places saying, you know, isn't there somebody out there that's interested in doing this?
And finally, they found somebody. Any other?
What's the most interesting thing that you learned through this process about Janesville and the people of Janesville, and looking at all of these different postcards?
She wants to know what's the most interesting thing about Janesville, or that we found in doing this, and that to me is a really hard question. Each time I open this book, I sometimes even just forget what I wrote about something, so it's interesting to reread it. And I enjoy seeing the places and how they've changed. So if I can see something in a postcard that that is there now, and then see how everything around it has changed, I find that interesting. I find it interesting how a wilderness gets built up into a city. How these people, I think you can probably, given all the things we could have written about, you can see what interested us most by the introduction. I talk about how these first 3 families arrived, built a log cabin. It wasn't very big, and they had these 3 families in, and a couple of months later a 4th family came, and I don't remember how many people there were, but they were all spent that first winter on the south of the Monterey Bridge in that one log cabin. And love to hear the stories of the, I'm sure, arguments that went on, or the jostling for space, or your kid did this, or you just imagine all sorts of stuff. Any others? Well, we have books over there. We have both that book and my novel. I've been advertising. We're selling it. If you do buy or have bought a copy of Janesville, we'll offer you a copy of the novel for only $15 instead of $20. And it's a different type of love story. Guy wants to become a priest, goes to a seminary, discovers he has doubts about God, falls in love with his best friend's twin sister, and the story covers 40 years of how their lives intertwined. And you can see 6 reviews of it on Amazon. And I was just telling somebody this morning that I know of one woman who read it in one night, who her husband kept coming out saying, "When are you coming to bed?" And she said, "Oh, I've got to find out what's going on." I only know of one that did that, but I also know a few others said they let their housework go, so that was a nice compliment too. So thank you very, very much.
And I just wanted to add, for those of you in the audience and on TV who want to know where they can find Janesville book, it is available at all the local bookstores, at the Rock County Historical Society, at Rotary Gardens, Walgreens, Dave's Milton Ace Hardware. So it's around all over the place, and please pick one up.
Thank you.